In September 2004, Haywood County experienced two devastating floods 9 days apart. The first resulted in extensive damage, whereas the second resulted not only in extensive damage, but 3 people lost their lives. In this episode of Canton, the Rest of the Story, local historian Edie Burnette discusses the 2004 flood with Phil Smathers, former Canton Fire Department chief and longtime town employee.
Phil Smathers and I remember very well the floods in 2004 when the Pigeon River flooded 2 weeks, a week apart. What I remember, the heavy rains that were spawned by the remnants of 2 hurricanes, Francis and Ivan, saturated the ground and caused massive flooding and destruction in and around Canton. Francis arrived first on September 7, and then Ivan followed on September 17th. In my mind, I call Francis the home wrecker and Ivan the killer. In town, Blue Ridge Paper Mill was temporarily idled, covered with at least 6 foot of mud on generators, computers, motors. A popular restaurant had to close and was eventually demolished. Including the Plus Laundry complex, which had been in Canton since the times when you bought coal and ice for your refrigerator. So it was a historic area, really. But that had to be removed. Company moved somewhere on Beaver Dam. And the rec park and the swimming pool, they were heavily damaged, along with the sports fields for Pisgah High School. Downtown, even propane tanks floated in the streets.
What I remember a lot of the plants and then the gardens, the peppers, the tomatoes coming down. It seemed like it came down worse on the second round, but I remember so much produce was in the streets and in the town. It was really amazing. And not only all the propane tanks and everything else, but that was one thing I do remember was all the produce.
Yeah, every chain link fence was just plastered with tomatoes and peppers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Bill Holbrook, who lives on 215, told me that he lost 27 acres of crops, and it was his tomatoes and peppers that we saw scattered around.
Yeah, they went all the way down to Waterville, most of the produce. Between here and there. Yeah. So it took a lot of topsoil, that's for sure. And of course we've recovered since then. But in the last flood as we've experienced has caused similar damage to the agricultural sites.
Phil, you can probably speak better to the water treatment plant, how it was affected, has been affected in every flood.
Well, of course, the water got real high on the intake for the filter plant, and it got so bad that we had to shut it down because of debris was blocking the pumps, to get the water up from the river to the filter plant. And we actually set a fire truck on the bridge, pumping with hard suction to supply the filter plant with additional water. So, even though we were getting a lot of muddy water, we weren't getting the trash. It was blocking the screens. So we had to wait till the water got back down to clean the screens before the filter plant actually got in, back into service in the right way. We even had to go to different places to get charcoal and stuff from other cities that had it, because our supply got exhausted real quick. But yeah, it was quite a bit of delay and people getting, good water.
There was such an odor from all of the propane gas, the sewage, raw sewage in the river. It's just still a shock when you think about it.
Well, it was amazing that, and I was at the Colonial Theater doing some work there, and I was standing at the door looking down towards the river, and the water, was coming, but I could hear something behind me running in the building. And of course the water was coming in through the sewers and the drains in the building. So, the drainage system got backed up the first thing before the water ever reached the buildings. So they were getting damaged on the inside even before the water reached them, simply because it's coming up through the sewers and drains. Yeah.
So how did you escape the building?
Well, we could see it coming, and we finally reached a point where we had to leave the building. And amazingly, this last flood, I was doing the same thing. I was working on some pumps down there that day, trying to get some of them back on. And it did the same thing. It come up through the sewers first. And it was really deja vu then. Because I was in the same place at the same time, all these years ago. Yeah. Except I wasn't the fire chief. I was retired and working part-time. So, but anyway, it's this lasting, of course, just like you, it's brought back so many memories that a lot of things familiar and a lot of things was a lot different this time also.
Like, what was different specifically?
Well, to me, it was a major flash flood, which we didn't have before. We didn't have the damage we had up in Crusoe in 2004. I mean, we had some damage, but nothing to compare with what happened during this last event. Of course, a lot of people, especially the the mill, had done many improvements since the last flood, since 2004, that this time they were pretty well prepared. I mean, with pumps and gates and things that they had built up through the years. And of course, the mill didn't suffer like it did in 2004. And it was due to what they did to prevent a flood.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the area, Bethel, Crusoe, the houses that were either floating down the river or just knocked off their foundations, that occurred in the rural areas more than Canton because so many people lived close to the river.
I think it's a big difference in 2004. There wasn't that big of, as many people living that close to the river back then as it was this last event. But still at the same time, in 2004, look at the houses we lost here. Of course, we lost Fiverville,
Yeah.
the old low area. And I mean, that was just about every house, except I think there's one gentleman actually moved his house after the flood to keep from having to tear it down. He put it higher on the bank, but he moved the whole house and redid his house, and it's still down there. But all the old Fiverville homes are gone, as you know. And of course, we lost houses on Penland Street, and in several areas. And especially up the river a little bit. Some of the houses that got flooded in 2004 got flooded again this time.
Yeah.
So, but it's one big thing I noticed in 2004. Like you say, we got two a week apart, and the water stayed up quite a while. I mean, the river didn't go back down for quite a few days. I mean, enough to really get in there and work. We worked, but we worked in water most of the time. But this time, the water came and it was gone in 45 minutes. Well, now it was gone. The river was back down. So that indicated the severity of the amount of water that was gathered at the head of the river.
Yeah.
We had a lot of rain in 2004, but it came. The river was just kept building up. Then the first flood, and then the next one, the water was so saturated in the ground, and the next one was just as bad because the water didn't have nowhere to go. But it wasn't as, to me, as bad, I mean, dangerous-wise as it was in this last event. Now, that was catastrophic. You didn't have time to watch the river because as you know, up towards Crusoe, it's narrow, it's prime for a flash flood. And the buildup of trees and debris on the bridges so fast. Of course, it took out most of the private bridges, and even the culverts and all were jammed up, and the water built up there, and then it turned loose and come down too. So it's a big difference in the last two.
I thought it was ironic. At least two of those Fiverville houses had been moved to Penland Street and refurbished, and people were living in them. But then when Ivan came, in the end, the river claimed all the Fiberville houses. There was no escaping it that time.
Yeah. Well, we lost, what was it, 3 there on Penn, beside the feed store, in the field there, there used to be houses. And we lost those, and we lost some off of Valley Street, Conley Street. That's on the other side of the river there, from the stadium. And you know what amazes me too is the smaller creeks, the creeks that you could step across. Both floods plus this flood, last flood, were huge. They were tremendous. It's just like up on Rhoda Street and those areas there. The water was collected in a short distance, but there was so much water that the same thing happened on these smaller creeks. I live up on Autumn Street. That's up above Ferguson Street, and I live up on a hill. The water coming off Highview was so tremendous. It jumped the curb up above there and come right down beside my house, and it looked like a river. Of course, some of it got under my house, but and it did it this last time too, but not to me, to the neighbor. The water had channeled back in the fields and came off just the same way. It looked like a river and a waterfall. And it was amazing, but it was short-lived. The creeks went right back down, but the damage was done. Up on Short Street, the American Legion building.
Oh, yeah.
There beside of the Midway building, which used to be the Little Boy area there. That culvert, well, there's a wall that fell on the other side of the medical building, and it dammed the creek up. It dammed it back across Short Street, and then the culvert going into Short Street washed out, and it floated a piece of that out. So we got about a foot of water in the Legion building, which it's way on up above the mill. But a lot of little things like that happened all over in the last flood. We lost some bridges all the way up Willis and Worley and some of the other coves. And I think there was some rescues up in those areas too during this last flood. But the difference, like I say, people had time in 2004 to realize what was going on, but this time it was just, I was down there, like I say, working on the pumps, and I said, the river's not low. I crossed the river right before that, and it was, it was way down, it wasn't very high, and then in an hour,
it was covered.
Everything was covered. So it's a big difference.
One of the things that I eventually realized was we tend to watch the river.
Absolutely.
And we forget about all the many little creeks, both in town and outside town. And what was once a placid little trickle all of a sudden became a torrent of water. And like on Rhoda Street, submerged the car, stranded people in their houses. At least 2 couples had to be evacuated by boat and spent the night in North Canton School.
Yeah.
And this is downtown Canton.
Well, in 2004, the water liked if it had got a foot or two higher, it had went through the cut, through the railroad cut, on down to Buncombe County. Of course, we had Beaver Dam Creek already flooding down there. And the water got pretty high this time. It didn't like a whole lot. You know, the river can change course, so to speak, in a heartbeat.
And it has.
Yeah, that's what happened up the river. The river's totally different up there now. It's wider. You can see where it changed course. Even up on Little East Fork at Camp Daniel Boone, it actually came down the road from, I don't know if you're familiar with Daniel Boone.
Yeah, a little.
That concrete bridge that goes across, it actually changed course and come down the road.
It did.
Yeah, and washed it out. And they've sustained a lot of damage up there too. Hopefully they'll be able to recover by the spring to where they can have a camp this year. But in the last flood, similar but not half as destructive.
Yeah.
I mean, there's boulders up there, and it was in the road, the size of a watermelon, just everywhere. You couldn't even drive through there. And of course, a lot bigger boulders.
The force of the water can move huge boulders.
Absolutely. And we know
Move
that.
them long distances.
Yeah. It's funny, it can float I don't want to say float a 20-ton boulder, but that's what it seems like. Because it'll move it a mile in no time in that big a boulder. But nature's nature. It can do a lot of damage.
Well, back to the origins of the 2004 flood. We thought that everything was going to be somewhat normal. And then here came Ida. Just a week later, and everything was covered again with water. The mills shut down. The water system, water treatment went out. It was just unthinkable that a second hurricane that powerful would hit that scene. And help had begun to arrive because there were experienced disaster teams from places like Greensboro, Kinston, Lincolnton, Washington. And they arrived rather quickly. But one of the vivid memories Doris Crawford Baxter left her home on Sonoma Road. And it was before daylight. She was going to work. And apparently she did not realize that the river had flooded. And she drove directly into the floodwater. And eventually they found her deceased in her car. But it had been floated down and lodged in trees. So that's why I call Alvin the Cure.
Oh, let's see. Yeah. Well, it's, it's a wonder that we did lose a lot more people in that 2004 flood. I think we had enough early warning then to, it made a big difference. Because we were projected to have 16 inches of, rain, so we knew that what was going to happen. And back then we had the monitors on the river, not as many as they do now. That it can tell what the river's doing as it comes down. It can actually follow it on the computer and tell the height of the water and what's happening. And this time it just went like that real quick. And you say, well, there may be a 15, 20, 30-minute difference in saving somebody's life. But at the same time, how you get that out to the public that fast. And today I don't think we have the capability of, NOAA's a good thing, but their alert system, people tend to ignore, a lot of times, and a lot of people don't have the capability of even hearing NOAA. And I hope, in the future that we have a better system of alerting everybody. Of course, you can get an alert on your cell phone too.
Yeah.
But
not everyone has cell phone.
Not everyone has that. And especially us older people, we don't have a lot of technical stuff. But I think that's needed, and it's going to be needed more in the future than even now. So hopefully we'll have a system that will alert everybody instantly. And of course that's, easier said than done. But at the same time, the more time you've got to react to something. And I think that's a difference in the lives lost in 2004 and the lives lost in the recent flood.
Yeah.
There was no time to even react to a lot of that. So. But hopefully time will change things.
Hopefully. I have an interesting comment that was made to me by a captain with the Shelby Fire Department, and I'm going to read that so I'll be sure it's correct. But I was talking to him. They were working up around Max Thompson Road. And, that area called Ark Park was just totally destroyed. But he said, these are amazing people. They are so used to taking care of themselves that we have to push them away to let us help. They want to take care of us. They are strong people.
And that's one thing in this last flood and the first was also that impressed me was a response from outside agencies. But the churches really got involved in this one. And I mean, just we were running over each other trying to help. And I was helping the preachers kind of come up with a schedule and who to call and what to do. And there was plenty to do. You just had to get on the list.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to food and things like that, and getting it to the locations that it was needed. But the churches really stepped in and did a tremendous job on this last one. I know
And they're
everybody
still
appreciates
doing
it. Yeah, and we're still in the process. And the stuff is donated to the people that lost everything. And it's just a tremendous effort to help. And I'm not talking just about from people in the county, I'm talking about people out of the county.
Oh, yeah.
I was standing down here with the city manager in this last one, and a lady came up and said, I've come from, and I can't really remember her name or where she was from, but it was quite a ways off. And she said, where can I go? What can I do to help? And we told her, how to, places to go talk to the people that's needing help. And, but that impressed me. But she wasn't the only one. I'm talking about, there was a lot of people that knew where to go and went there directly. But anything was asked of the churches, they got it. And it's still that way today. I'm surprised at the money that's been raised for the people here in Haywood County through the United Way. Those donations and go directly to people here that need help, which was outstanding.
And they get that in their hands so they can do what they need to do.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And Awesome Rain, I'm proud of them coming down
yes.
and donating their time and equipment and effort. Of course, they're county boys, and we love them for what they're doing. And we'll all be here, I hope, to help in the next one, whenever that's going to be. And but keep in mind that the need in Haywood County is going to continue. And I'm sure everybody's aware of that. So.
I hope so.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to go away anytime soon.
No, the effort in 2004, let's see, we reopened it's over a year and a half. If I remember right, try to get everything back to normal. And I think this time it's going to be a couple of years before we recover from this one, and hopefully there won't be another one in between that. The future of the low-lying areas, and of course state and federal, want to lessen the dangers in the flood areas, and rightfully so. But they need to, and we need to keep in mind that, that's people's property. And they need every opportunity to invest in what they need to do to their property to help mitigate damages in flood plains. 2004, we bought out all of Fiverville and some of the houses on Penland Street, but we inherited the property at the same time, and I'm talking about the city.
Yeah.
And so we have to keep it up. So, it's still ongoing. If you want to look at it that way, the flood of 2004 we're still recovering from, so to speak, even today. But it's an endeavor of love for Canton and the city fathers, and all need to be applauded for their effort, especially during 2004 and our recent flood too. So everybody's trying to help.
That's good attitude to have.
Well, That's what we must have.
That's what, yes.
And tell us your names and what you were doing during what was your official work, I guess, in 2004?
Okay.
Okay, he was real official.
Well, I'm Phil Smathers, and I started work with the town in '71. Came out of the military then, and I joined the fire department, or started work in the fire department as a fireman. And I worked my way up through the years to chief, which a lot more responsibility on me. I had to be the chief building inspector for the Canton area, or any of the Canton properties. And during the flood of 2004, I was the chief building inspector and the fire chief, which put me at ground zero for the duration, which was a rather extensive job back then. But my job was to assess all the damage that was done and work directly with FEMA to do the paperwork, which I learned a lot during that time. But I'd have to assess each house that was damaged and put a cost. And they had formulas and forms to fill out, and of course they helped too as far as the damage assessments. But each house had to have several paperwork to get anything done. And of course stuff like that took a little time. And we did it as efficient and as quick as we could. And I think the people that really benefited during 2004 can appreciate the effort that was put into working with them and their property.
Okay. My name is Edie Burnette. I am a former school teacher. At the time of the 2004 floods, I was working as a freelance columnist for the Asheville Citizen. And because of that, I needed to get out on the road. I needed to see what was going on, ask questions of people. So I saw some things that I normally would not have been able to see. I talked to the people who were here with the disaster teams, the Baptist men and all those groups. Well, it left an indelible mark on my mind.